time. And you were just getting started. They used to think leadership was loud. They measured strength and volume in how many people looked at them when they entered the room. But here's what they never understood. The real ones don't need the spotlight because they carry the storm within them. You didn't challenge him. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't throw insults or flex muscles. You just existed. And that was enough to make his chest deflate. He kept repeating himself, trying to reassert dominance, trying to reclaim the moment, but the energy had already shifted. The room had chosen. Respect had changed direction, and it was staring straight at you. And what did he do? He folded himself out of existence. Not because you tried to destroy him, but because your presence revealed he was never built like that to begin with. You didn't break him. You didn't humiliate him. You didn't even raise your damn voice. And that's what made it worse. Because in his world, everything is a show, a performance, a constant battle for validation. And you showed up with nothing to prove, and suddenly he was the one exposed. Every sentence he spoke after yours wasn't power. It was panic. You could see it in his eyes. The flicker of did I just lose this room? The cracks in the armor, the stutter in the breath. He tried to smile, tried to laugh it off, but no one laughed with him. Because deep down, they all felt what you brought. That undeniable frequency that can't be faked. That I've been through hell and built myself there kind of silence. And as he looked around, desperate for someone to save his pride, all he saw was a mirror reflecting everything he pretended to be, standing right in front of him. You. The room was quiet now, not because they feared him, but because they were watching you. You didn't ask for followers. You didn't need a crown. But somehow they all started moving toward your gravity. That's the moment it hits a fake leader the hardest, when the pack he thought he owned starts leaning toward the storm he was trying to warn them about. They saw the shift. Not in words, not in noise, but in presence. That kind of presence? It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't beg to be seen. It walks in, and reality corrects itself. And now he's scrambling. He's overcompensating. Repeating phrases like he's trying to restart the script, but it's too late. He was the alpha until the room met the original threat. The one who speaks once and echoes forever. See, the thing about real dominance, it doesn't need a title. It doesn't need backup. It doesn't even need to win the argument. Because real dominance is quiet, unshakable, and always watching. He thought being loud made him untouchable. That barking orders made him respected. That fear was something you could fake and still hold on to. But what he didn't realize is that fear only works until it meets something stronger. And you, dear warrior, you weren't afraid. Not for a second. That's when it all unraveled. His voice started cracking. His confidence started leaking through the holes in his performance. And the crowd? They weren't following him anymore. They were studying you, like you were the answer to a question they didn't know they were asking. And here's the most poetic part. He thought he was the storm, but you were the reason the room stopped breathing. It wasn't you who shattered him. It was the silence after your words, the weight of your calm, the stillness that screamed louder than his ego ever could. He looked around for validation, but none came because the room had already crowned the new energy. And that energy, was you. They used to call him the Lion until they saw you walk in, and the jungle bowed in confusion. His power was borrowed. Yours, forged, earned, unshakable. They whispered about you afterward. Who was that? Where'd they come from? What the hell just happened? Because you didn't introduce yourself with volume. You introduced yourself with vibration, and it rippled through every soul in that room like a warning shot from fate. This wasn't about pride. This was a spiritual recalibration, a reshuffling of the throne. And he wasn't even invited to the war. He called himself Alpha. But the second you walked in, his instincts told him the truth. There's levels to this, and I've never even met one like that before. That's what shook him. Not your presence, but what your presence exposed. See, most people wear their power like a costume. Loud colors, louder words, and a script they rehearsed for rooms full of weaker minds. But you wore silence like a loaded weapon. No safety on it, no trigger needed, just one look, and every fraud in the room felt the countdown begin. He couldn't match your energy, so he tried to clown it, mock it, minimize it, but you didn't even flinch. And that was the beginning of his collapse. Because it's one thing to bark, it's another to stand in front of someone who doesn't blink. And when he finally looked away, everyone else looked toward you. He had the lines rehearsed, the posture perfected, even the smirk timed like a clock. But the moment you stood still, the whole act fell apart. Because you weren't playing his game, you didn't need to. You walked in like a plot twist, and the entire story rewrote itself around you. He tried to pivot, tried to raise his voice, tried to reclaim the frame, but something was off. The room wasn't watching the noise. The room was listening to the quiet. You're quiet. That's the thing about presence. It doesn't ask. It doesn't explain. It doesn't justify. It just is. And it makes people with borrowed crowns start sweating through their suits. He wasn't afraid of you taking the spotlight. He was afraid that you didn't even want it. And still somehow you had it. That's what wrecked him. Not that you tried to dominate, but that you already had, without a word, without a move. Just existence that broke the pattern. You didn't raise your voice, you didn't flex, you didn't move a single piece off the board. You just stood there and let his own illusion eat itself alive. Because power isn't what you show, it's what you withhold. They expected a clash. They expected chaos. But all they got was silence. And one man unraveling in front of the very people he once ruled. He kept glancing your way, like his confidence was asking for backup. But none came. Even his own voice sounded unsure now. Even his own shadow started backing away from him. See? People like him collapse the second someone walks in who doesn't fear their volume. Because your presence is pressure, not loud, but heavy, like gravity from a star he'll never reach. And when he finally stuttered, not because of your words, but because of your stillness, the room knew the torch had already been passed. He just hadn't realized he was holding ashes. He thought silence meant safety, that if you didn't move, he still had control. But you weren't watching. You were writing the ending. And every second he spoke, every gesture he made, every attempt to reclaim the room, you let him dig deeper. You didn't interrupt. You didn't correct. You just let the fraud speak long enough to prove he was one. His charisma turned shaky. His rhythm broke. The people who once echoed him started blinking in confusion because their alpha was glitching. Here's the truth, legend. Real dominance doesn't interrupt noise. It outlasts it. And in the void between his words, in the awkward pauses, the stammered comebacks, you were winning. Without a crown. Without a throne. Just with that look in your eye. The look that said, I've already replaced you. Now I'm just letting you say goodbye. And then just like that, he stopped talking. Not because he was done, but because he realized he was finished. The silence wasn't yours anymore. It belonged to everyone watching him fall. They didn't cheer. They didn't clap, because they finally understood. You weren't here for applause. You were here to restore balance. The room started to shift. The people who once leaned in when he spoke were now leaning away, not out of disrespect, but out of realization. He wasn't the force in the room anymore. You were, and not because of volume, but because of weight. His legend unraveled. His throne dusted. And you didn't even blink. No speech, no claim, just a shadow in the center of the fire, untouched. Once the smoke cleared, once the silence settled into something colder, they didn't see a man. They saw something else. A force, a fracture in the rules they thought governed this world. You didn't rise. You hovered. Not literally, but energetically. Because when people witness something they can't explain, they stop calling it talent and start calling it danger. He didn't just lose his grip, he lost his shape. He became a warning, a whisper, a remember what happened last time story told in back rooms. And you walked through the crowd like a phantom they all felt, but couldn't face. No handshake, no smirk, no closing line, just the heavy understanding that you were never meant to compete with them. You were meant to end the conversation completely. They don't mention you out loud anymore. They whisper, careful, cautious, like just saying your name might summon something they're not ready to face. Because you didn't leave a message behind. You left a scar. Every alpha, every loud mouth, every attention chaser, they've got a new ritual now. They check the shadows before they speak. They scan the crowd for the silent one, the one with eyes like riddles, and a presence that bends the atmosphere, because you did something legends fear to even attempt. You took power without asking. You walked in with no crown, no army, no banner, and still made kings flinch. They call it dark energy, they call it unnatural, but deep down, they know it's just undeniable. You didn't speak to be heard. You existed to be felt. And now, even when you're not in the room, you're in the room. You didn't slam the door. You didn't burn the place down. You just stood, nodded once, and walked away. But what you left behind, that wasn't silence, that was gravity. Every room you exited felt colder, like you took the heat with you, like the temperature dropped just from your absence, because you weren't noise, you were presence. And presence, that can't be replaced, it can't be faked. It shifts timelines. The ones who called you crazy are now checking their doors twice at night, not because they fear you'll return, but because they know you never really left. They study your stillness now. They try to copy your detachment, your control, your chaos. But they're only mimicking the shell, not the storm that lives beneath it. Because you didn't just walk away. You rewrote what power looks like. and made every loudmouth feel hollow. They spent years mocking the silence, dismissing the discipline, laughing at the one who didn't beg for attention. But now they imitate your every move, study your posture, break down your stare, and still, they don't get it. Because what you did wasn't for them, wasn't for show, wasn't to prove anything. It was transformation. It was rebirth in the dark. It was becoming something untouchable, while they were busy becoming liked. You didn't go viral. You went vital, essential, unavoidable. You're not part of the conversation. You are the conversation. And the ones who tried to cancel you, they're now quoting you, referencing you, copying you, with trembling hands, and no soul behind their strategy. You weren't built from applause. You were forged in disrespect. And now every room, every circle, every so-called kingdom, they all carry your fingerprint. You didn't fit the mold because you were the fire that melted it. Warrior, if you've made it this far, you already know. This wasn't about fame. This wasn't about revenge. This was about awakening. They tried to watch you, track you, stop you, but you were never walking on their map. You were building your own universe, and now they speak of you like a myth, but feel you like a curse. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them try to dissect what you've become. 'Cause here's the truth they'll never say out loud. You didn't just survive the dark. You became its architect. You are not a chapter in their book. You are the flame that burned the library. Now walk, warrior. Don't look back. Let the silence trail behind you like thunder after lightning. Because they didn't just lose to you. They lost the version of themselves they thought was unbreakable. Hello, dear warrior. They've sent storms. They've sent betrayals dressed as friends. They've thrown silence, guilt, loss, even demons disguised as desires. But you absorbed it all and kept walking. So one day, hell pulled your name, sat down at the table, lit the black candles, started the ritual. And then something stopped. It wasn't fear, not the kind they know. It was recognition. They saw something in your file that made the room cold, not ice cold, existentially cold. Because it wasn't just pain you'd survived. It was pain you weaponized. You didn't just endure darkness. You danced in it, spoke to it, tamed it. So the devil looked up, saw the storm that forged you, and said, no, not that one. Not this time. Not because he couldn't reach you, but because he knew you'd already been through worse than hell, and you didn't flinch. See, most people think evil is loud, think it storms in with flames, claws, and curses. But the real evil, it watches first. It studies, silently. And when it studied you, it didn't see a victim. It saw a mirror, a reflection of chaos, but controlled chaos. Someone who'd been dismantled, piece by piece, only to rebuild themselves using the very shadows meant to break them. You didn't pray to be saved. You didn't beg for mercy. You opened the door to your own demons and whispered, You either get in line or get erased. That's when the devil knew. This wasn't about punishment anymore. This was about respect, about recognizing when you've met something you can't corrupt because it's already made peace with its own darkness. You're not haunted by darkness anymore. You own the lease. And hell, it knocks now, but it never enters. Picture this: a table deep beneath the fire, lined with souls that cracked at the sound of their own name. Spirits, broken like glass, filed away in hell's archives. Then comes your file. Black cover, red seal. Unopened, by choice. They didn't just hesitate. They argued. Not this one. He doesn't respond like the others. We tried guilt. He turned it into fuel. We sent temptation. He laughed in his face. We threw his past at him. He built an empire out of it. They opened it anyway. Inside, no fear, no guilt, no broken patterns to exploit. Only one note, handwritten in jagged red. Already been here, left stronger. That was the moment it clicked. You weren't afraid of hell. Hell was afraid you'd come back, because you don't walk like someone who survived darkness. You walk like someone who became it. And now, they've closed the case. Not because it's over, but because they lost. They say demons never quit. That once they mark you, they chase you for life. But then you came along, and the chase didn't go how they expected. They whispered your name in rituals. You answered with silence. They tried to send nightmares. But you'd already lived worse awake. They threw heartbreak at you, and you grew sharper. They shattered your trust, and you used the pieces to carve a crown. So when the demon assigned to you came back, he didn't brag. He didn't mock. He came back quiet, eyes wide, voice low. He whispered, "We picked the wrong one. This soul doesn't break. It doesn't burn." They laughed at first, until the next demon said the same. Then the next, and the next, until finally, no one volunteered. No one wanted to touch you. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being the target and became the test. And hell, it doesn't test gods. You ever seen shadows step back? Not run, not disappear. Step back. Like they saw something in you that made them forget who they serve. That's what started happening. Because the usual rules, they didn't apply to you. You didn't fight darkness. You absorbed it. You didn't deny pain. You drank it like morning coffee. And now, even the shadows are asking for distance. They know what you are. Not light, not dark, but the silence in between. The silence that doesn't need noise to be terrifying. The presence that doesn't need a weapon because it is one. When they looked at you, they didn't see a soul to torment. They saw a mirror, a reflection of every failure they've had. A reminder that some people can't be touched. Not because they're protected, but because they've been through worse and never asked for help. They say everyone has a breaking point, a line you're not supposed to cross, a pain that rewrites who you are. But you crossed it. You didn't rewrite. You erased. You burned the script they gave you, tore out the pages of weakness, of guilt, of regret, and wrote nothing in their place. Nothing. Because even the words were too small for what you became. You didn't bend. You didn't break. You reformed. You became something that can't be described in human language. Not a survivor. Not a fighter, not a winner. Something older, something colder, something calmer. And the devil? He saw it. He saw it before anyone else did. And that's why he backed down. Not because he couldn't beat you, but because he realized he'd be fighting something with no end. You don't fade. You don't retreat. You multiply. The more pain they throw at you, the more versions of you appear, and everyone is harder to destroy. Pain used to love messing with you, used to creep into your chest at night, whispering doubts in your ear like lullabies, used to flood your mind with what ifs and not enoughs while the world applauded everyone else. But now, pain's exhausted. It's tried everything. Shame, loneliness, failure, loss. You didn't just survive it. You turned it into armor. That's what broke the system. They designed you to collapse under pressure, to fall in line, to beg for relief. But instead, you built a throne in the fire, and pain became your background music. You walk different now, not because you're arrogant, but because you've seen the bottom and laughed at it. That's why the devil stays out of your way. He knows what happens when you run out of fear. You become free. And a soul that's free terrifies everyone still wearing chains. They thought fire would finish you, that if they cranked the heat high enough, if they threw enough chaos at your soul, you'd melt like the rest. But the fire didn't break you, it crowned you. You didn't scream, you didn't beg, you just stared back with calm eyes and let the inferno introduce you to your final form. That's the problem with their kind. They keep forgetting something important. Some people weren't made in peace. They were forged in the middle of a breakdown. You're one of those. You don't walk like someone who escaped the flames. You walk like someone who owns them now. Now when the storms come, when the walls shake, when the lights flicker, it's not a warning anymore. It's your entrance music. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to prove your worth. Your energy walks in first and the room adjusts itself. They used to whisper about you, laugh in corners, mock your pain, spin stories about how you'd never make it. But now, they whisper for a different reason. Not because you're weak, but because they're scared your shadow might be listening. The same mouths that once mocked you now check the room twice before speaking your name. You didn't get louder. You didn't get revenge. You just kept moving. And now they're stuck, watching you from a distance, wondering how you flipped the script without saying a word. You made your silence louder than their screams. You made your pain more powerful than their applause. They thought they were watching your downfall. Turns out they were just watching the intro. That's why even the devil backed away. He's not afraid of noise. He's afraid of silence that knows what it's doing. The kind of silence that seen too much, lost too much, and still stayed standing. They thought you'd stay down, that the damage was permanent, that the silence meant surrender. But what they didn't understand was you weren't done. You were reloading. You weren't hiding. You were evolving. You weren't broken. You were being redesigned by the pain. So when you walked back in, not limping, not crying, but calm, clean,